Welcome back to Families in Action, right here on KHTS. AM 1220, your hometown station. Hello, I'm your co-host, Michael Doherty, and now, here's the man with the most. Here's your host, Cary. Get your motor running, Quashen.
That was good, Mike.
I don't know what it meant.
And we keep these things, and we try to lighten things up, especially when we have heavy topics. But let me just get back to numbers again. What's the numbers, Mike?
Well, we're talking about suicide prevention, and here in Santa Clarita, that's what our listeners need to understand. We are talking about here in Santa Clarita. We're not talking about national. And on September 3rd, KHTS ran an article right here on their website at www.hometownstation.com, and it was written by Heather Harbin, who did an excellent job.
She's wonderful.
In the article,
Yeah,
Heather mentioned that there were 18, as of January, there were 18 suicides here in Santa Clarita. And what we've been talking about here today is that since this article ran, we're now sitting at 21 suicides.
You know, I want to say something. I was talking to a friend of mine, and everything in life's temporary. Everything is temporary. We're temporary. Our clothes is temporary, our cars are temporary, and our feelings are temporary. Things change. And the great thing about what we do is, forget the alcohol and drug stuff that I run. I run the behavioral health unit at Henry Mayo. And how do you get into that unit, Mike?
Well,
you can't just walk in because life's good.
And you can't just walk into the ER and say, I feel like I need to be in there. You really have to meet one of three criteria. You either have to be suicidal with a plan, and let me explain that. People say, I'm going to kill myself. But the more specific it is, the more likely that it's going to be carried out. So you have to come in with a plan. And it can't be, I'm going to jump off the Eiffel Tower, because that's not realistic. You have to be in Paris to do that. But if you said that you were going to do something to yourself with a gun or a knife or what have you, then that's specific. So suicidal with a plan, homicidal with a plan, meaning that you want to take someone else's life,
right,
and you have a plan for doing that. Or what they call gravely disabled, which is a little more difficult to explain, but it's basically somebody that just can't get through the day without help. They need assistance with a variety of things.
So we have 23 beds there. We're pretty much consistently almost full.
And this morning we were.
Yeah, so you got 23 people walking into a unit, and the only way they can get there is by wanting to kill themselves, somebody else, or gravely disabled. Right. There is another way. And the other way to come in is, if you're just super, super depressed and you don't know and you just can't get out of bed and life's just falling apart, you can meet criteria to come in there too then. And
a lot of times people meet more than one criteria.
So you don't have to be completely suicidal. But the reason I'm saying this, I've been doing this for 30 years, and you too. Right. You have no idea how many people that we've worked with that said, I want to die, and actually did everything they can to take their life, lived, and was grateful and thanked God for that.
Right. Yeah, we know that suicide is a very, very complicated situation. It's not one thing or one person or one circumstance that leads to it. We know a lot of people that are suicidal have serious depression or some other mental health issue. We know that lots of things can contribute to this sort of thing, but we know that if you can get to where there's help, it's really a preventable thing.
Yeah.
For instance, we've had, for instance, before I started at the College of the Canyons, there were 3 suicides that were students, and none of those 3 students had come into the personal counseling program. And we've had a couple since I've been there, just these recent ones. None of those students had been into the personal counseling program. So we know if students or people can get to the behavioral health center, can get to the personal counseling center on the campus, can get to Child and Family Center, SCV Youth Project, Santa Clarita Mental Health, their
call the suicide helpline.
Call the suicide helpline, their private provider. We we know that mental depression is a treatable disorder. We have different kinds of therapies, we have different kinds of support systems, we have different kinds of medications in some cases. We know this can be prevented if people know where the resources are and they actually are able to take advantage of them. So we want to educate everyone on what some of the warning signs are.
Before the warning signs, talk a little bit about depression versus clinical depression.
Everyone could get depressed in some ways, and sometimes, things don't go well. You might wake up feeling a little down. Your goals don't seem crystallized, or you don't just feel yourself. But clinical depression is I'm not sure what you're getting at in terms of the distinction. But when you're clinically depressed, you're feeling so hopeless and so trapped and so down that you're actually not thinking rationally. You don't see that there are options. You don't see down the line, or your vision gets you lose your peripheral vision, basically. And you really think that there really is no answer. And even though everybody around you may be able to say, hey, there's this option, and you really don't see that. And sometimes that's just a biological problem.
Right.
And there's so many things that we can do to help with that biological problem, to help people to start problem solving again.
Cary, I also wanted to help Larry just a little bit with answering your question, because I know a little bit more where you're going with that, because we have a couple of things going on.
Even though he answered it
He
terrifically.
answers it beautifully, and he's the therapist. He knows.
But that's what the clinical depression is. We fight with our boyfriend, husbands, wives, whatever. We get depressed.
We have a down day. We have a bad
We
hair
feel
day.
horrible and suicidal.
Right.
But it lasts for a short period of time. It doesn't interfere with our worlds.
And the other thing
clinical
is,
depression doesn't leave.
And exactly. And when you're just down, you can pull yourself up out of it. But when you're clinically depressed, you can't.
Right. And it's, some people describe it as, you have a storm over you. It's like you're being rained on. It's like this cloud kind of comes over you, and you just don't think that cloud's going to move on. It is. People do recover from depression all the time. People recover. But when you're in that storm and it's raining on you, you really don't feel like it can get better.
The light at the end of the tunnel is the train.
Right. You just don't see it.
But the amazing thing is, especially working in the behavioral health unit, is we see these people come in every day with major suicide attempts. Major. There's a lady that was the husband found her in the bathtub, passed out. She would have been dead. That's just an example of what we see. And then we get to see the miracle later when they start getting a little bit of therapy, they get on the right medications, their clinical depression starts to lift, and they're going, my God, I can't believe that I wanted to die. So I guess what I'm saying is suicide, and I know this is a cliche that everybody says, but suicide really is a permanent solution to something temporary. Remember, everything's temporary. Everything's temporary. If we just want things to be better and we do the footwork. I was talking to someone the other day that said, I'm just going to pray for my kid. I said, praying for your kid's wonderful, but you better do some footwork too.
Right. And we know there's kind of a stigma attached. There's a stigma attached to suicide. There's a stigma attached to mental illness. There's a stigma attached to being depressed. So we tend to think that, there's something wrong with me, I'm crazy, or there's somehow I'm flawed, or my kid is flawed because he's depressed, or something. And we want to try to break through that. We know that everybody has problems. Everybody has mental health problems. And the stigma is what keeps people from reaching out and getting the kind of help. And amazingly, you and I have been in the business for 30 plus years, and you too, Michael. And for us, there's no stigma to receiving therapy. There's no stigma to being in a counseling program or a treatment program. But for a lot of people, it's a stigma.
It's interesting that you brought up stigma, because there was recently a story on the news. A university did some research, and they found that, and this is interesting, that the stigma is beginning to fade a little bit. People are beginning to understand it. But one of the things in the article,
Well, they better with these numbers.
yeah, and here was the thing. One of the things that they found was that people understand that depression can cause suicide, but they didn't understand that anxiety can also do that.
Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, almost any kind of mental health disorder can lead to suicidal thoughts or suicidal feelings, and a lot of times it kind of piles on. For instance, if you're depressed and at the same time you have a lot of college stress, or you have family issues, or there's a substance abuse problem with either yourself or somebody around you, or any one of a number of traumas that could happen, things start to pile up. So we want to make sure that people know, hey, there's no stigma to getting some help, and things can pile up, and so there's resources out there, and there's things that you can do.
It's like this: if you aren't feeling well and you think maybe you have the flu or something like that, you go to a doctor. And if you're dealing with this kind of a thing, you need to go to the emergency room, go to see somebody, because you can get help.
By the way, the worst thing somebody can say to somebody that's depressed is get over it.
Exactly.
Do it.
That's not.
That is the worst thing you could say, or your life's so good, how could you feel that way?
Right.
Look at what you got.
Right.
Look at the people that actually committed suicide. Robin Williams, he had everything. So just because every people have stuff doesn't mean that they feel good. So get over it doesn't work.
And your involvement in chemical dependency comes into play here, because an awful lot of people try to self-medicate. And so I don't feel so
Right.
good, so here's what I'm
And
gonna
by
do.
the way,
Right.
that works for a minute.
Yeah.
For about a minute.
short minute or a big minute. It works, but you know what? Drugs stop working. And when they stop working, then you can't get high, you can't get sober, and you're even in bigger mess.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
If somebody is sitting there listening to this now, Larry, and they're saying, okay, I get that part of it, but how do I know what's going on? What are some of the symptoms? What
Well,
happens?
we know the signs. You mentioned probably the most important one, which is if there's some kind of organized plan. If somebody says, they have a plan to take their life, and you ask them, well, how would you do that? Well, with a gun. Well, do you have access to a gun? Yeah, where? It's in my father's closet. Really? Do you have the ammunition? Yeah, where's that? Well, it's under the bed. Right. When do you plan on doing this? Tonight. Is anybody at home? No. So this is where alarms should go off when there's an organized plan and they have access to the plan. So we want people to not be afraid to ask questions. Are you thinking about suicide?
And you better take that serious if they say that.
Yes, it's an important thing. The other thing we want to look for is feelings of hopelessness. We talked about that people can recover from feelings of depression or feelings of suicide, but when you're feeling hopeless, or you're feeling trapped, or you notice somebody's withdrawing when they used to be sort of outgoing, or all of a sudden they're overly outgoing when they used to be withdrawn,
Loss of interest in
Loss of
pleasure in
interest
things that they used to find pleasurable, right?
Right. And
It also affects their appetite.
right. Changes in sleep, a lot of anxiety or agitation. Reckless behavior. We know for some, suicide is a very stigmatizing kind of behavior, and so people tend to do, some people do other things, like they'll drive recklessly. They'll say, well, I'm just going to drive my car, recklessly, and then we'll see what happens, or they'll do things that just, is out of sorts of what their normal behavior are.
They'll drink a lot more than normal,
Right.
use more drugs.
Substance starts coming up, or
Fatigue, loss of energy. Is another one.
maybe the most important one, they start talking about suicide. If you hear somebody starting to talk about suicide, you ask them, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about taking your life? It's an important question. We teach in mental health first aid. If anybody's interested, we have these occasional courses of mental health first aid. People can come and learn about these sorts of things.
Because Larry, one of the things that people out there and the listeners, I'm sure, are saying, wait a minute, if I say something to somebody that's thinking about suicide, aren't I going to cause them to go ahead and commit suicide?
Right, and that's the big myth. We think that you've actually, now I'm putting that thought in their head. Actually, it's a sense of relief. They've probably told people in different kinds of ways, sometimes very masked ways.
And that's the most I really want to get through right now is many people, not all, if somebody really wants to die and they've already made up their mind, chances are something's going to happen. But most people that are suicidal throws little hints out.
Right. They're ambivalent because, like I said, it's a very complicated kinds of problem. It's not like, hey, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal, I'm going to take my life. They have some ambivalence. They have reasons to live. They have reasons to die. They're rational. They still have some sense of rationality. And we know, for instance, people that have jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, halfway down, they change their mind.
Yeah.
And people that have survived will tell us that. So the ambivalence we know is there. And so when somebody says they want to take their life and you ask them, are you thinking about that? They get a sense of relief. Hey, finally somebody noticed. You know.
What should you do if
by the way, before we even go, there's a few more little signs that I want to throw out. Some is when people start giving their stuff away.
Oh, that's
right.
a big
That's
one.
a very good one.
Yeah. And we had one of those a couple weeks ago where we work. I got a phone call. Not only did this person start giving his stuff away, broke up with his girlfriend and quit his job. Now, wait a minute. He's giving all this stuff away, broke up with his girlfriend, quit his job. He's planning something.
And statements like, you'd be better off without me.
Right.
Right.
Those are the
And we know
opposite.
that, like, for instance, elderly people usually had seen the doctor within the last month. You know, and so they come in for maybe a physical ailment, or they just need somebody to talk to or whatever, and they'll have taken their life, less than a month after they had seen their primary doc. So we really want to make sure, primary docs and docs are aware of some of these things and ask the questions.
In like a minute's time, what would you say to somebody that you suspected was thinking about suicide?
You want to say, I really care about you, that you want to listen non-judgmentally, you want to be able to listen to what's going on. So you ask, well, what's going on? Listen non-judgmentally. You can encourage them to seek professional help. You can, assure them that they can recover, that things can get better. You can give them information about, depression and suicide. You can encourage to do self-help sorts of things like friends, family, church, faith, temple, that sort of thing.
Anybody they feel like comfortable talking
but
to.
I want
right?
to throw one more thing in before the break is, and if they're refusing to do something, if you're their friend and if you care and if you really love them, do it for them anyways. Don't take it for granted.
And don't let them make you swear to secrecy.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I was just going to make, Michael, thank you. If there's no secrets.
Right.
And we want to make sure that adolescents know this, because in high school, well, don't tell anybody, but I'm thinking of taking my life. There's no don't tell anybody. You always go to somebody, an official on the campus or somebody you know. There's no secrets on if somebody's thinking about taking
Imagine
their
if
life.
somebody said to you, I think I want to kill myself, and you don't do something, and they do. The guilt that you have to live with. When
Okay.
somebody's telling you something like that, they're really reaching out and saying, hey, do something.
Right.
On that note, we will be right back. This is Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Wow, Suicide Prevention Month, and I'll tell you something, what an intense show.
It has been.
I mean, I am a firm believer that knowledge is power. So the more we can give knowledge, the more power people have.
And speaking of knowledge, I want to mention that this article that Heather Harbin wrote, September's National Suicide Prevention Month, I know you wouldn't say this, Cary, but I will. You were quoted quite a bit in this article.
He's the man.
You're the man.
Well, thanks.
And that's passing along knowledge. You're helping people get that power they need.
We have to.
And Larry has been talking about some of the things to look out for and what to say if somebody comes up to you and says, or somebody that you know may be considering suicide. What we need to do now for the folks that are listening is, Larry, what kind of resources do we have out there?
Well, let me say one thing for sure is that there's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. This is a hotline that's available 24/7. We're encouraging everybody in the community to put this number in their cell phone. Now everybody has has a cell phone. It's like having a little counselor in a pocket.
Right.
You know, anytime you have somebody that you're talking to that may feel suicidal, or you're feeling suicidal yourself, there's a number you can call. It's 1-800-273-8255. It's 1-800-273-8255. If you would take the time to put that in your cell phone, you'll be happy that you did at 2 in the morning when you're talking to somebody and they're feeling, because you can call that number and say, hey, I'm talking to my son, or I'm talking to my friend, I'm talking to somebody here that's feeling suicidal, and they'll talk you through it. They'll say, well, where are they willing to talk to me? So they will also be able to give you the local resources, you know, that are right here in Santa Clarita Valley or the surrounding areas.
And what are those?
You know, our main local resources besides the behavioral health unit for 5150 or hospitalization are the Child and Family Center at 259-9439 and the Santa Clarita Mental Health Center on Cinema Drive. And I don't have that number like right in my head. Maybe you've got that with you.
It's on the internet.
Right.
Mental health.
You can go on, you know, the city's website. You can go on the Student Health and Wellness Center's website for resources. And the Santa Clarita Valley Youth Project is another important resource for youth under 18 that might feel suicidal.
And another one that we just forget about is the county, the sheriff's department. They just created a team even.
They did.
Mike,
They did. It's
That's a really good point.
So if you have a crisis and you call 911, they're not going to arrest anybody. They're going to come out and assess the situation.
They have mental health professionals now as part of a team they can send out.
If you
So somebody's actually suicidal, they could actually come out, assess the situation, and actually put somebody on a hold and make sure that they get help, immediate help.
Right. Like we've noticed, for instance, that I've talked to Kathy Hunter over at the Heart District. I asked, well, how's it going with suicide prevention? Well, we haven't had any suicides, but we've done a lot of hospitalizations. And for us, that's a success.
Yeah.
If you can get to the point where the student is actually talking to somebody on campus and we effect a hospitalization, we've saved a life right there, and that's a good thing. So getting in the hospital is not a bad thing. Some people think, oh, there's a stigma to that. No, it's not. It means we've actually saved a life.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you what, reaching out and asking for help is something successful. It's not a negative thing. When somebody says, I need help, that's a huge part of the problem. That's a huge part of the success of the problem.
Hey, Larry, for somebody that was fishing around for their device, their electronic device, can you give that hotline number
I'd be happy
one
to.
more time, nice and slowly?
It's 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255 or 273-TALK. T-A-L-K.
Talk, 273-TALK.
Hey, there's kind of a fun thing coming up here.
Yeah, we have
COC.
this big event on the college campus coming up Tuesday, September 29th. We're actually inviting the entire Santa Clarita community to come out and see Joss Rivendell. He's a actor. He's going to be doing the I'm Possible project, and it's the name of his performance is Kicking My Blue Jeans in the Butt, if you don't mind me saying that.
No, I like that.
And jeans
we're
are
off the air.
spelled.
That was a nice 13 years.
Jeans are spelled G-E-N-E-S. So he's basically, his father took his life, and he's like learned how to deal with that, and learned that there's a biogenetic component to depression, and it's a little bit. I haven't actually seen it, but I've heard incredibly good reviews, and he's coming on from way across on the other side of the country. We've brought him over here, so it should be a really good program. It's Tuesday, September 29th from 1 to 3 p.m. on the Valencia campus in Boykin Hall 105. So
And that's probably a good
come out
place to meet other people and talk about it, right?
Right. Well, there'll be a discussion. We'll have therapists there for a discussion afterwards,
Excellent.
Can I say one more thing about...
Please do.
There's, sometimes when there's a suicide in the community, we have a lot of mixed feelings, and we want to make sure that we emphasize that depression is a very complex thing. So you might feel guilt or anger or sadness or any number of feelings that that have some rationality, but just remember there's a lot of mixed feelings, and it's a very complex thing, and we encourage people not to get stuck on any one feeling, but to just sort of let feelings come and go, and if you know somebody that's taken their life, chat with somebody, whether it's a professional or a friend or somebody, because just know that you have a mixture of feelings that's going to come up, and they're normal, and they can be really, really powerful. Intense, yeah. And one more thing, if you want, we have a mental health resource or a wellness resource fair on the college campus coming up really soon. It's September 30th from 11:30 to 1:30 right on the college campus. So there's another host of resources, virtually any kind of mental health or wellness resource. If you need help, we're going to all be on campus, and you can just kind of stroll around and get brochures from everybody that you can think of.
Knowledge is power.
Sure is.
And we're giving a lot of knowledge today, huh? Which
we
means
have.
a lot of people are getting some power.
Larry's always great. Lots
Larry's
of resources.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So it looks like we have to wrap it up, Mike.
We'll be right back next Monday with more Families in Action right here on KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station.